The time is short, and we are learning this morning Parashat Emor. Emor el Kohanim, Bnei Aharon. So, as an opener, just to open the appetite for our offering this morning, we'll ask a simple question which you're always allowed to ask. When you're learning the Torah, you have every right to ask, what is the connection between the subject before and the subject after? That means we're allowed to study the Torah on many, many levels. First, you could study the Torah, what it says in the Parashat. But then you could say, why is it next to that Parashat? There must be a connection in what we call the juxtaposition. Nobody knew that word juxtaposition till Art Scroll came. And now you see every single guy, oh, the juxtaposition is if you knew that word. It's okay. Yeah, all these new words that only Art Scroll found out. So you see the guy, what's the juxtaposition? Do me a favor, that's a $10 word. Anyway, what is the juxtaposition between the end of last week's Parashah? The last pasuk in last week's Parashah is V'ish or Isha. Ki yeh bahem ob o yideoni. Mot yumatu ba'eben yirgimu otam demehem bam. The Torah says that you're not allowed to go to a witchcraft. You're not allowed to go to a fortune teller. Ob yideoni. And if a person does these, services, mot yumat, you're not supposed to do it. And then the pasuk says, "Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Emor el Kohanim, Bnei Aharon." Go to the Kohanim, Bnei Aharon. Seemingly, there's no connection between these items over here. So if you look at the Baal HaTurim, the Baal HaTurim comes along and he says like this. If you look at the Baal HaTurim, Samach Azharat Kohanim lelo yitam'u le'ov. What's the connection between the Kohanim that they cannot become tameh to the ov, to these magicians and witchcraft? Samach Azharat Kohanim lelo yitam'u le'ov shegam bo ne'emar Azharat shelo letum'ah bo. Because the pasuk also uses the word tum'ah. The pasuk says tum'ah. Where does it say tum'ah? If you open up Yud Tet Lamed Aleph, go back to Yud Tet Lamed Aleph. I'm going to read you the pasuk. It also talks about Oben Yedeoni. The pasuk says, "Al tifnu ela ovot vela yedeonim, al tevakshu letum'ah bahem." So you see, it's a form of tum'ah. So there's two types of tum'ah. There's tum'at ov. What type of tum'ah is that? It brings a tum'ah on the person's body when you're going to, ask the future from the cemetery, or you use bones, or you use different mechanisms to try to figure out the future. And there's another type of tum'ah. Now that we're on the subject of tum'ah, tell the Kohanim they cannot become tameh to a corpse. So the connection is tum'ah. That's the Baal HaTurim says. And what's the logic? Shesinichim netamot k'sheshoalim bo. The old custom was for these people, they would go sit in the cemetery and they would get tum'ah on their bodies. And by getting the tum'ah on their bodies, that would cause them to be able to see through black magic and get all this type of, visions. That's the first interpretation. There's one guy who doesn't know how to use the Zoom. Same guy every day. He turns on the Zoom and he starts talking to his wife. He gets undressed. He goes into the shower. Same guy every single day for 10 years that we're doing the Zoom. He still didn't learn how to put the mute button. It's the same story every day. Okay, I'm not the administrator of this chat. I'm also a guest. You believe it? I'm a guest in my own Zoom chat.
In your own home.
In my own home, I'm a guest. So I have no control of it. They're muting me. They mute me. They're playing. That's the way it works. Okay. Next explanation. Inameh. Another explanation. Lahachi samach emor lakohanim leovi deoni. Another reason why we made this connection. She'im tomar ממי נדע העתידות, עלינו דרש באובי ידעוני. What do you mean? If we can't go to the Oven the Yedeoni, how are we going to know the future? We need to know, should we go to war? We need to know who's going to win. We need to know who's going to be the forecaster. לכן שמחנו אמור לכהנים. הרי לך כהן שישאל לך באונים ותומים. We have our kosher Oven Yedeoni. You know who the kosher Oven Yedeoni is? He's called who? The Kohen. So therefore, the pasuk flows beautiful. ואיש או אישה כי יהיה בהם אובר ידעוני מות יומת. No open Yedonis. Hey, but I need to get information. Emor LaKohanim b'nei Aaron. Go to the Kohanim b'nei Aaron, and they have the Onim v'Tumim. And therefore, if you're interested in knowing some future, ideas, you can go to them. He has the Onim v'Tumim. He has the breastplate. So you ask the question to the Kohen who's wearing the breastplate, and they'll let it start to flash, and therefore you'll know. So we have this, which means the Torah gave you a kosher way to do what you're not allowed to do by the Ob, you're allowed to do by the Kohen. That's another connection between the two parashiyot. הרי לך כהן, ששלחי בו ותומים, והכי איתה בתנחומה. And this is what it says in the Midrash. ואיש או אישה כי יהיה בהם אוב ידעוני. זה שאול ואישה בעלת אוב. וסמוך לו אמור לו לכהנים. Which means, what happened? What happened over here was the story of Shaul HaMelech. Shaul HaMelech, if you remember, he actually went to a lady who was a fortune teller. He wanted to know what's going to be, regarding the war. And he shouldn't have gone. There's claims against him. And it's actually amazing Midrash. The Midrash comes along and says that in this parasha, God showed Moshe all the future generations. He saw all the future generations that are going to come, out of Bnei Israel. Yeah, and he saw Shaul HaMelech. And he saw Shaul HaMelech, the Midrash says, is going to die. Shaul HaMelech is going to die. It says actually, he died in war. So Moshe Rabbeinu, when he sees Shaul dying, he felt very bad. So he says to God, the Midrash says, Melech Rishon, Yidaker b'Cherev. The first king should be slain by the Cherev. It's not fair. Moshe is defending Shaul HaMelech. So God says, you have questions, you have claims on me? Emor LaKohanim. Go ask the Kohanim. Go see what Shaul did to the Kohanim. Shaul actually was paranoid from David HaMelech. And he felt that the city of Nov, who was the Kohanim, they were with David because they gave him food. So he says, I'm the king, and you're siding with my enemy. So he held that the Yoav actually, advised them that what? That not Yoav, Ahitophel, advised Shaul that these guys are rebelling against you, the Kohanim. So Shaul went and he killed the whole city of the Kohanim. So the Midrash goes like this. Moshe Rabbeinu was seeing Dor v'Dorshav, Dor v'Shoftav. And he comes to Shaul, and he's watching the movie of Shaul. He sees the movie of Shaul, he dies in the war on a sword. So he tells God, Melech Rishon, Yedaker b'Cherev, the first king should die like this. And Borei Olam says, you have claims against me? Don't ask me. Emor LaKohanim. Go ask the Kohanim if he deserves to die. Look what he did. He killed no Kohanim. That's the Midrash. There's a rabbi called Lev Aryeh. The Lev Aryeh has a few questions on this Midrash. Number one, why does Moshe Rabbeinu refer to Shaul as Melech Rishon? And Melech, do I care if he's the first king, if he's the second king, if he's the third king? Why? He doesn't deserve to die because he was the first king? He doesn't deserve to die because he was the king. Why does he use that Lashon? Melech Rishon? This is the answer. But what does it mean to say? I know the answer to the questions. This is a rhetorical question. So he comes along and he says, Melech Rishon, Yedaker b'Cherev, Melech Rishon. Even if he's Melech Sheni, even if he's Melech Shenishi. And secondly, what does it mean that God comes along and answers? What do you mean? Go ask the Kohanim. So he explains it like this. He explains it like this, and this is a big yesod in Judaism. There's another king that also was involved in a sword. He didn't die by the sword, but he used the sword to kill a rebel that rebelled against him. Let's review the story. David HaMelech alav shalom was in a war against Ammon. And he felt that Uriah was a traitor. Uriah actually was the husband of Bathsheba. And for whatever reason, he felt Uriah was a traitor. The Gemara explains why. So what did he do? He put him in the front lines. And it says, when the Ammonim came with their swords, they came and they killed Uriah. And God has a claim against David for this. The Pasuk says, "Ve'oto haragta be'cherev b'nei Ammon." You killed Uriah with the cherev of b'nei Ammon. Now God doesn't say you killed him with the cherev. He says you killed him with the cherev of b'nei Ammon. So it sounds like it's not that the claim was you killed an innocent man. He deserved to die.
Not by them.
But you used the cherev of b'nei Ammon to kill him. What's the difference whose cherev we used? We got to kill him. He says, Borei Olam says, you made a terrible Hilul Hashem, David. Why? Because on the Cherev B'nei Ammon, it had the Avodah Zarah. It had the snake and all their stuff. So when the Cherev B'nei Ammon killed Uriah, what did the Ammonim say? You see that? Our Avodah Zarah brought us victory. So David, by you putting him in the front lines, you only gave credibility to the Avodah Zarah. So if you would have killed him with your own Cherev, he's right. He's a Mored B'Malchut. He deserves to die. So the claim was not that you killed them, but how you killed them. And that's why when David HaMelech makes Teshuvah in Perek Nun Aleph in Tehillim for this episode, he says, Lecha lebadecha hatati. God, the sin that I did was to you. Which means it was Hilul Hashem. It wasn't a sin against Uriah. Uriah was guilty. But the sin was lebadecha, to you I sinned. What do you mean? If you killed an innocent man, it's not a sin to God, it's a sin to Ben Adam Lahavero. No, David's sin was Ben Adam Lamakom. He says, I made a sin over here. Fine. So what did God say? God says, I forgive you. I forgive you. Borei Olam forgives David HaMelech. Even though he made a Hilul Hashem by using that, giving, again, credibility to the Cherev B'nei Ammon. You follow me so far?
Yeah.
Now watch this. Shaul HaMelech. You know how he died? He was in a war against one of the enemies, and they were coming after him, and they were going to kill him. So what does Shaul HaMelech tell his helper, his serviceman? He says, "Take my sword, and I'll fall on my own sword," because he knew he was going to get killed by the enemies. So what did he say? I don't want to make Hilul Hashem. I'd rather fall on my own sword, so they won't come along and say, "Look, the sword of the Avodah Zarah, the Pedishtim, they had Dagon on their sword, which Avodah Zarah, the snake, exactly." So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "I don't understand. The first king should die beheaded, as opposed to the second king. The second king is more guilty of the cherev. The first king tried to avoid what the second king did not. The first king wanted to avoid that Hilul Hashem." You understand the question now? Melech Rishon Yidaker b'cherev. Why should the first king be killed by the cherev? Adrabah, he was trying to avoid the cherev of the goyim, something that the second king was not trying to avoid. So therefore, why do you give a courtesy to David and you don't give a courtesy to Shaul? He's in Penn Station. He's in Penn Station. It's okay. He's in Penn Station. So why does he turn on the Zoom? I don't know. He's in Penn Station. The announcements in the background. He's watching TV. That happens every week. He doesn't know. He's not there. I can't ask him. He's not there.
Yeah.
He turns on the Zoom, then he walks away. He's not even there, honey. If he was there, I could talk to him. He's not even there. And then after the class, he says, "Wow, what is shi'ur? What is shi'ur?" He didn't hear one word, the guy. What's shi'ur? He's making scrambled eggs all the time. Listen.
You can put him in. You can put him in a room. You can put You can put him in a room.
Listen,
You know that?
this happens
You
every
can put him
week.
in a room. You move this person.
You'll teach me after B'zat Hashem. Okay. Okay.
Why
Now
you
watch.
can put him in a room?
Now watch. So now what happens is.
Where's the menu, ya Habibi?
So now what happens? Oh, so now we understand what David HaMelech, what the claim of Moshe was. Melech Rishon, Yidakir B'Gharev. Why do you give Melech Sheni a courtesy that you don't give to Melech Rishon? So the explanation is like this, and this is a very, very important klal that we see many times. Borei Olam knows that there's two types of sins. There's a sin that's been Adam lamakom, man to God, and then there's been Adam lahavero. You see many times that God will say, "What you do to me, I can forgive you. That doesn't bother me. But what you do to people, that I cannot forgive you." That means Borei Olam is easier to forgive the sins that we commit to Him, but don't make sins ben Adam lahavero. For that, I don't forgive you. The Gemara says, Yerovam ben Nevat, he did all the Avodah Zarah. But then when he stuck his hand in order to punch the Navi Ido, all of a sudden his hand froze. His hand became paralyzed. The Gemara says, he's doing all this Avodah Zarah, his hand didn't become paralyzed. Well, Allah says, Al tigi'u b'mshihai, u'ben bi'al tari'u. Avodah Zarah, leave it. I close my eyes. But now you want to hit the Navi? Now already, Ben Adam Lahavero. But Elam could forgive the sins of the people when it's regarding Ben Adam Lamakom. So now we understand what happened in this midrash. Moshe Rabbeinu comes along and says, I don't understand. Why did David get a courtesy? Because what was David's sin? David's sin is Ben Adam Lamakom. He gave credibility to the Avodah Zarah. But what was Shaul's sin? Emor la-Kohanim. He killed Novi Kohanim. So even though when it came to Ben Adam Lamakom, he was careful, and he fell on his own sword and didn't allow the sword of Dagon to kill him, but that's not going to justify what he did to Nov Eira Kohanim. That's Ben Adam Lahavero. And when it comes to Ben Adam Lahavero, there's no forgiveness. And therefore, Melech Rishon, although he did something better than David, but it was in the realm of Ben Adam Lamakom. And in the realm that is more important, which is Ben Adam Lahavero, unfortunately Shaul was less careful, and as a result, God says, Emor la Kohanim b'nei Aharon. Beautiful. Go ask the Kohanim what they have to say about Shaul, and they obviously are not going to be too happy. They're not going to be too happy. And I can forgive, but they're not going to forgive. That's the difference. They, in heaven, they're mekatreg on Shaul. So therefore, I said, from my standpoint, it doesn't bother me what Shaul did with all other sins. But when it comes to this over here, I have Ben Adam Lahavero on his head. In David's case, what was on his head? Ben Adam Lamakom. I have veto power. I can erase it. I have no problem. But when Ben Adam Lahavero is being prosecuting, then already we have a hard time to just say, don't worry about it. I cannot tell the people don't worry about it when it bothers them. So that teaches you the level of how careful we have to be Ben Adam Lahavero. Okay, that was just introduction. That wasn't what I came to discuss, but that's a nice little opening in order to... It's opening. Okay, now we go into the main item of the day. ויאמר השם אל משה אמור לכהנים בני אהרון ואמרת עליהם. We have a double language. אמור ואמרת. אמור לכהנים ואמרת. Why the double language? So that she comes along and says אמור ואמרת להסיר גדולים על הקטנים. Over here, אמור, Moshe Rabbeinu has to tell the גדולים. ואמרת, and they will tell the קטנים. That means we learned a lesson over here of Chinuch. Emor ve'amarta. Moshe Rabbeinu will hear it from, the adults will hear it from Moshe, Emor, and then ve'amarta. They have to give it over to the Ketarim, to the kids. Emor ve'amarta, double language. The question that the great Rabbi Kut was not, the great question that the Rav, no, he doesn't care. He doesn't care, the guy. He doesn't care. He's hired by our opposition to heckle the class. I'm telling you, there's guys that pay him every week. Go on the rabbi's class. Go on the rabbi's class and heckle him.
He's a life hacker.
He's paid. This is the guy saying the same guy in Columbia, the same guy in Columbia University with the Free Palestine. It's the same guy. I can't shut the guy. Okay, I'm muted, but I'm muting my.
Are you the administrator? We cannot do anything.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to have to leave this conversation here because we have 20 guys over here in Florida and it's interrupting. So I think I'm going to have to leave this Zoom over here because I cannot hear myself with this background music. That's it. I left it. I just leave it up. So now the issue is over here like this. Why over here? It's the only time in the Torah that says Emor ve'amarta. Every law should be, you learn a law, tell it to your kids. We don't see it anywhere, Emor ve'amarta. Normally, Vaydaber Adonai Moshe lemor. Over here, Yomer al Moshe Emor kohanim bnei Aaron ve'amarta alehem. The only time in the Torah you see this double language, Emor ve'amarta. And the question is, why? Why is it so that we have this double language specifically by this law? So there's a rabbi called Rabbi Zalman Sorotskin. He wrote a sefer called Oznaim LaTorah. You probably have it somewhere in the room over here. He says a beautiful explanation. And this is a lesson in raising children. He says, raising children, one of the challenges is besides what you're teaching the children in the home, you have to be concerned what they're going to learn in the street.
What they see, what they do.
Okay, what they're going to see in the street.
The action.
What they see in the street. Because what happens, the street also contributes to the Hanuk of the child. A lot of the time, the kid's in the street the whole day. And therefore, if you're giving him one type of Hanuk at home, but in the street, it gives him the opposite. You're trying to teach him certain values, certain derech eretz, certain dress code, certain speech, and you're very careful. And then he goes out 8 hours a day, and he is in the street, the schoolyard, they're talking a different way, and the bus, they're talking a different way. So you have contradictory hinuchim lessons. That causes that creates a situation where the parents have to double down their efforts in order to strengthen their hinuk because they know they have competition on the outside. But imagine you lived in, let's say, a religious neighborhood where anything that you're teaching in the house actually is being reinforced outside the house. You live in a religious neighborhood and everybody's Shomer Shabbat. So therefore, beautiful, you see, the kid, that's what my father taught me. And therefore it's easy for him to acclimate. And kashrut and all these other laws. So that's the biggest challenge over here. The biggest challenge is we can control what we teach our kids in the house. However, we have to be concerned that the exposure on the outside doesn't dilute the values that we try to infuse in our children on the inside. So the explanation we said is like this from Oznaim LaTorah. Let's say you teach your children you cannot eat McDonald's. When he goes in the street, Baruch Hashem, he sees all his Jewish friends, nobody eats at McDonald's. They all go to the kosher hashkacha, and he tells them, make sure you keep Shabbat, you're not allowed to ride your motorbicycle on Shabbat. He goes in the street, all the motorbicycles are chained up on Shabbat, Baruch Hashem. So whatever he's doing, that's why I said the motor. Whatever he's doing and teaching in the house, it's getting reinforced by all his friends in the street. He comes to shul, nobody has in their snack not kosher food. So Baruch Hashem, the father says, great, everything is good. After lunch, everybody takes up a katamazon. That's why my father tells me to make katamazon also. Everybody's making katamazon. Wow. Gives him hizuk. He makes katamazon. Now all of a sudden comes Erev Shabbat. All the kids in the street, 5 o'clock, we have to go inside, we have to take a shower. Okay? So the street is only giving chizuk and reinforcement to the that's right, in general. So that's very good. However, here we have a problem. this father over here, who's a Kohen, he tells his son, listen, he tells his son, you're not allowed to go in the cemetery. He goes in the street. All the kids are playing in the school, hide and go seek. Where do they go hide? They go hide in the cemetery. So the guy says, what do you mean over here? Why are they able to go in the cemetery? He doesn't understand it. So now all of a sudden, now we have a case where the child is not getting a reinforcement from what he's learning in his house from the street. And for good reason. A Yisrael is allowed to go into the cemetery. There's no restriction on him. So therefore the father, when it comes to Hilchot Kohanim, comes into a very, very big chinuch dilemma. How can I teach my son in order to become a Kohen when he's seeing everybody else in the street not behave like Kohanim for good reason, because they're not Kohanim. So I have to now teach him that, well, although you're seeing them do it, they could do it, you can't. It puts a great strain and challenge on the father to give the chinuch. Therefore, in cases that the street does not reinforce the lesson in the house, you have to double down on that chinuch. And that's why specifically over here it says Emor ve'amarta. Over here is the only time it's Emor ve'amarta. Because here, you're not going to get the strategy. If I tell my kid keep Shabbat, so between my telling him keep Shabbat and seeing all his friends keep Shabbat, that's it. That's a built-in Emor ve'amarta. The street is your ve'amarta. When I tell my kid, don't eat tarif, Emor, where's the va'amarta on that? The street, kulam, everybody's keeping kosher. However, over here, I'm going to tell my kids, don't go into the cemetery, you can't marry this type of lady, you have certain restrictions. As long as I see my friend, he's marrying a divorcee, and he goes into the cemetery, and he just came back from a funeral. What can he do? What can I do it? So now the kid finds himself in a contradiction. And that's what the Torah says over here. On laws like that, where you're not going to get help from the street, not only you're not going to get help from the street, you're going to get an opposite message. That's why it says specifically over here, Emor ve'amarta. There, the chinuch in the house has to be doubled. It has to be reinforced twice. That's why in this case over here, we have Emor ve'amarta. Based on this, we can explain something else. And this is a very, very interesting point that I saw Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky brings down. We have later on in the Parashat, Torah says, Ubat ish kohen, ki techel liznot, et aviha hi mehalelet, ba'esh tesaref. What's the case? Ubat ish kohen. She's the daughter of a kohen. And she's commits znut. She commits promiscuity, exactly. So it says, et aviya mehalelet. She disgraces her father. Ma'ish tesaref. Now, what does it mean over here? She disgraces. She disgraces her father. What are you saying? What are you saying? You're confusing me. What does it mean over here? Well, then have to review. Ubat ish kohen ki tehel liznot et aviya mehalelet.
Meaning the father.
Oh, if you know it already, so then say it before I said it. There's no chokhmah. There's no chokhmah to say it after I say it. Tell me what I'm going to say next. That's the hadush. Don't tell me after I said it. No, it's worse than the Zoom guy. It's worse than the Zoom guy. I don't have a mute on this guy. I have a mute on that guy. I can't put a mute on
They pay me.
Oh, they pay you. They also pay you. Another heckler. I got rid of the Zoom guy and I got stuck on there. We got over there. This is my vacation.
Better go to the Zoom again.
Okay, so now, ubat ish kohen, ki techel liznot, et aviya mehalelet, ba'esh tesaref. So Yaakov Kamenetsky says, what are you getting the father involved over here? It should just say, ubat ish kohen liznot, ba'esh tesaref. So he says, beautiful explanation. He says, if you look in the Gemara, at the end of Sukkah, you see a famous story. Famous story is where there was a certain mishmar. Mishmar is one of the families that worked in the Beit HaMikdash. And that was called the Bilga family. Not Bill Gates, Bilga. And Bilga family, they got penalized. That while all the Kohanim used to get the bread when they used to enter, they used to divide the bread with the incoming mishmar and the outgoing mishmar. So they would divide it in the north and they would divide it on the way out in the south. Bilga, they put them in the south, which means they were penalized always in the south. You can't be with the other Kohanim. Also, when it came to slaughtering animals, they put them in a separate section. They locked up they put a padlock on their locker. So the Gemara said, "What did Bilga do? What do you want? What did they do?" They said, "Because they had a girl, a renegade girl called Miriam Bat Bilga, and she once came into the Beit HaMikdash, and she took a shoe and she started to hit the Mizbeah, and she said, Lucas, Lucas. She called the Mizbeah a wolf. You're hungry wolf. You're eating up all the korbanot from Bnei Israel, and you don't give them rahamim." She spoke, bad. So the Gemara says, "Fine. You have a girl that's a renegade. You punish the whole family." So the Gemara says, "What do you think? Where do you think she learned it from?" The Gemara says, "Shuta di'inuka b'shuka." When you hear a child talking in the marketplace, or the abu or the imeh, it's either they heard it from the mother or the father. And therefore, yes, we're going to punish the whole Bilga family because Miriam, where did she get this type of talk? Lucas, called him Mizbeah, disparaging words. She must have heard it in the house. Oh, Hazak Baruch. So Yaakov Kamenet says a big hadush. He says, if you look in the Torah, you'll always see that the claim against a girl will be blamed on the father. The girl is blamed on the father. First of all, we see that Gemara. They blame Miriam Bat Bilga, which was a girl, on the father. Therefore, they punish the whole father and his whole mishmar. Al Parashat ubat ish kohen et avia mehalelet. You see a na'ara me'orasa that commits znut. It's a girl that's engaged that commits immorality. It says they stone her. Where do they stone her? El petach bet aviha. They stone her by her father's house. Why specifically, he says, do we see this issue that we always blame the father when the girl goes off? So he says something amazing.
For 2 minutes, I'm hardly breathing. Now I close my mouth, I close my ears, I close my nose, I close everything.
I cannot breathe. I don't want you to die. So now,
Coach your lesson.
Rav Yaakov Kamek says something beautiful. He says because if a boy goes off the derech, you can't necessarily only blame the parents, because the boys used to go to yeshiva. The boys were out of the house. But the girls in the olden days, there was no yeshiva. Where did the girls get their chinuch from? The girls got their chinuch from the house exclusively. So you can never blame a girl's bad behavior on the street. Exactly. That's exactly why you're blaming the father. Because the only place where she learned it from was from the father. You can't say she learned it on the school bus, she learned it in school, she learned it in the schoolyard, she learned it in the... They didn't go to school. Girls stayed home. So where did the girls get the... Up until 100 years ago. Where did girls get the hainuk from? So anytime a boy goes off the derech, you have contributing factors. You could say, well, he learned it over there, he learned it over in the school. But when a girl goes off the derech, there's only one place she could have learned it from. She must have learned it in the house, because that's where her education was. And that's why the Pasuk says, Bat Kohen ki techel liznot et aviyah. It's the father's fault. Maybe she learned it on the school bus. She don't take the school bus. Maybe she learned it in camp. There's no camp. You can't in the dorm. There's no dorm. You can't blame it on everybody. And that's why it says Na'ara me'orasa that commits zinut. They take her to Bet Abiha, because if she committed zinut, she must have learned Imran. And that's why Miriam Bat Bilga was a girl. They punished the father. He makes a theory, because in those days they didn't have education. Now today it might be different. Today the parents might not have that same onus. If a daughter goes off the derech, you might not, right? Now already you can't put the full brunt of the blame on the parents. Because listen, maybe we gave her good education, but she learned it She went to a program. She was in the Sunday program. She learned it from. She went to. So since it changed, now watch. I heard a beautiful explanation. Could you bring me Shulchan Aruch Mishnah Berurah Bet? Mishnah Berurah. Oh, maybe it's here. Honey. 1 second. Yeah, Bet. Oh, we have it here. Not Bet. Wow, what a thing. Yes, beautiful. So look at this in Siman Kuf Kafchet. In Siman Kuf Kafchet, it's the laws of Birkat Kohanim. So over here, yes. So look what he says over here, the Ramah. The Ramah is talking about over here Kohanim that making sins. So it's possible that a Kohen is able to lose his status. Yeah, it's possible that a Kohen can, if a Kohen marries a divorcee, for example. I said if a Kohen makes certain sins. What are you pointing? Don't point. If a Kohen commits certain sins, he loses the right to make Birkat Kohanim. What problem? A Kohen that marries a divorcee, you let him go up to the Duchan? Of course not. Maran says clearly, Kohen shenasa gerusha lo yisad kapav. Why? Because that's a sin that's exclusive to Kohanim. If a Kohen eats a cheeseburger, we let him make Birkat Kohanim. Because that's not what made him a Kohen. That's not a Kohen sin.
By birth.
Exactly. That's a Jewish sin. But there's certain sins that are specific to Kohanim. So then he writes over here, oh, you're sure? Because Israel can marry a divorcee. A Kohen cannot. So since that's a sin that's exclusively to Kohanim, so therefore you're not behaving in a status. You're not behaving in a Kohen status. What you want? You want the best of both worlds? You want to live the life of Israel and then go have the benefits of a Kohen. No, you cannot. Now listen what the Ramah writes. It's a beautiful halakha. I mean, it's not beautiful, but the Hadush is beautiful. V'yesh omrim. Demi sheyesh lo bat shehemira la'avodat kochavim. Let's say you have a Kohen has a daughter that she went off the derech and she converted to Christianity, or shezinta, or she committed znut. En mechuyavim od lekadesho. You're not obligated to give the father any benefits of Kohanim. Ki aviha hi mehalelet.
That's a very strict.
This is from the Mordechai. The rabbi called the Mordechai. This is what he says again. He says, if you have a Kohen that has a daughter, and she's either a renegade, she's wearing a cross now, or she committed adultery or znut, now already you don't have to give the father aliyat Kohen anymore. It's amazing, you're punishing the father. And because the pasuk says this week's parasha, et aviyai mehalelet. Very strict halakha. Look at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah says, Haynu le'inam neftoach rishon. You don't have to give him aliyat Kohen. So then he says, no, you don't have to give him aliyat Kohen anymore.
It's not forbidden.
But leave the halakha. You got the point that he gets penalized for his daughter's. Now look at the Mishnah Berurah. So he comes along and he says, "Bekatvu Aharoni." Mishnah Berurah writes, "Tibizman hazeh en minhag lefsol kohen b'shvil zenut bito or hamarat dat shel beno bito." Today, the Mishnah Berurah says we don't follow this halakha. It doesn't explain why. You have over here Mordechai. All of a sudden, Mishnah Berurah giving us reason. You know what? Doesn't apply. According to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, we understand. Because before girls had schools and before girls had education, where was the education of the girl coming from in the times of the Mordechai, which is 1200? At home. So therefore the Mordechai said, listen, if a girl commits that avon, the father's fault. Itavit mehalelet. But says the Hafizim, now that already they started schooling the girls, and therefore the girls go out of the house, you cannot necessarily punish the father. That's the Sevar of the Mishnah Berurah. You cannot punish the father for the crimes of the daughter because he's not solely responsible anymore. Which means you see over here that the halakha changes based on the social practices of the time. Since the social practices of the early generations, girls did not go out of the house to have chinuch, therefore the brunt of the child's misbehavior fell on the parents. And that's why the Mordecai said, if the daughter becomes a renegade, it's the father's fault. No Kohanim. No Aliyat Kohen. Mishnah Berurah will come along and say, 700 years later, well, today it doesn't apply. Why? Because you really can't blame the father exclusively if the child became like that. Why? Because things changed. What changed? The daughters now are not locked up in the house and just being educated by their parents. They're going out. They go to the park. They go to the stores. Today, there's ladies that walk in the street. And therefore, since that happens, something's going to change. It's going to take some of the brunt off of the delinquent parents, although the parents are not off the legamre, but now you can't blame them completely. And that's why the Mishnah Berurah might say that Bisman Hazeh, the law doesn't apply. So that you see over here, Rabotai, the beginning of Parashat Emor actually gives us the greatest lesson in how to raise children. Today, that the street is so against what we're trying to teach in the house, therefore we must reinforce and double down. Every halakha today in Judaism has to have Emor ve'amarta. Not only if you're a Kohen. Because today we teach Shabbat, in the street it's against Shabbat. We teach Kashrut, the street is against it. So therefore, every halakha today becomes like Kohanim. And that's why the Pasuk ends, Ve'atem tiyuni mamlechet Kohanim ve'goy kadosh. There's going to come a generation where you're all going to be like the Kohanim. That means you're going to have to redouble your efforts in the house like the Kohanim have to do it. Because Kohanim always had to do it because there's no choice because there's always Yisraelim that don't follow the practice. So you need to strengthen it. But in a certain sense, we're all like the Kohanim. Because when you have the street in contempt of everything, so then already you have to Emor ve'amarta la'azir gilum v'ketarim. Finally, if we're talking about Chinuch Yeladim, so we can explain successful methods in raising children and maybe methods that are outdated, that might have been good in previous generations but not in current generations. Because again, you have to follow the social accepted practice. You can't just say, well, my great-grandfather used to take a baseball bat and when I didn't keep the halakha, he would swing. He would smash my head. And that's why I do the same thing. Well, those days, that was considered the normal way to corporal punishment.
Unless you're Moroccan, it's exception.
But today, maybe it's not accepted such a thing. When I was in Magen David, 7th grade, we used to get hit. Rabbi David Biton, no, he hit the kill. He hit the hurt. But in those days, nothing happened. The teacher wasn't reprimanded. Your parents didn't come up to school to complain. They didn't call social services on the teacher. Nobody had a camera videoing the guy hitting you. The guy, if you took there was no camera, but if you would take the camera and he'd crush it with his hands. But today, already if a child gets looked at the wrong way, the parents are up there, the sheriff comes down, the police, social services, open a report, file a complaint. Before you know it, the kid who punched the teacher in the nose, the teacher's in jail. And the parent comes the next day, yeah, I got that teacher. Even though he's in reverse. So you have to be very, very, very sensitive and very careful. So therefore, what's the way to teach children today? The best way to teach children, we explained it many ways, many times. They ask me to speak all over the world. And the main topic that they ask me to speak about usually is raising children. And I always tell them, sorry, it's not on my menu. That's not one of my items. They say, it can't be. Every public speaker in the world, that's the number one topic. I said, you found the exception. It's not on my menu. Ask me anything else, I'll speak, but not raising. He said, what, you don't have children? I said, of course I have children, I have grandchildren. You don't think, Rabbi, it's an important topic? I think it's the most important topic. But the topic that you asked me to speak about, raising children, I don't have one speech on it. I can't believe it. He's okay. What do you speak about? I said raising parents. That if you want me to talk about, I have 20 speeches on that over there. Because you want me to come along and you want me to tell you what your children are doing wrong. And then you can sit in the class, yeah, I'm going to get those kids. The rabbi said, I got to do this, and I got to do that, I got to do that. And you leave the class feeling very, very good about yourself. I'm going to give you a class telling it's your fault. Which means forget about your children. Raise yourselves. If you raise yourselves to a higher standard of living, guess what? You won't have to raise your children. They'll be raised automatically. And that's raising children by example. You know, exactly. If the child sees the parent, forget about talking. Talk is cheap. The tzaddikim omrim me'at ve'osim harbeh. In the realm of chinuch, you don't have to say so much. But they do a lot. And the child sees the example. That's the greatest way to teach. And therefore, I explained Rashi over here. Now, when Rashi writes his commentary, he has to write it for the ages. Correct? Rashi's commentary does not expire in 1986. It's for the ages. So Rashi says, Emor v'amata, lehazhir gedolim ala ketanim. That means to warn. Azhara. That sounds like the old education. Lehazhir, I'm warning you. If you don't do this over here, I'm going to kill you. Okay, so now that Rashi seemingly has a date. It's dated. I have to say this Rashi will expire in 2011 when society now became fragile. Shalom. But maybe we have to read Rashi different. How do we say in Hebrew a shining light? A shining light is Zohara. Why do we call afternoon Tzahorayim? Zohar and Zohar. The Tzadi and the Zayin are interchangeable. So Zohar ta'aseh lateva. Zohar ta'aseh lateva. Meaning make a light. And therefore in America, when we want to show an example, what do we say? He's a shining example. What does a shining example mean? Meaning you through your actions, you're illuminating them and the child sees it. And therefore could be what Rashi says, lehazhir. Lehazhir doesn't mean to warn. To shine. Lehazhir gedolim ala ketanim. Today, lehazhir put away the baseball bat. Retire the baseball bat. And the hockey stick and the slipper. Today, it's lehazhir. We tell the parent, be a shining example that you should light up by your actions. Raising parents. Before, it was raising children. Now it changed to raising parents. And that's what it means. Emor v'amad. That if the parent already will live by the values he preaches, then he doesn't have to preach. All he has to do is practice. We'll stop over here. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen. Amen. Azak Baruch. The Bay. Well, that's